A few weeks back, we crowned a champion in our first ever crime battle.
The winner, Crime Capsule, hosted by Ben Morris. This time, we're giving you a bonus recap of the most recent episodes of Crime Capsule.
And next time, we'll come back and share an interview we did with Ben Morris.
That's on this episode of So Much Crime.
So little time.
Before we jump into today's episode, don't forget we're on Patreon. Patreon.com/so much crime, so little time.
And if you haven't yet, remember to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen. And also give us a rating, 5 stars, please. We really appreciate it.
Woo!
Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Dee. And before we start, this is a special bonus recap episode of our show.
You can definitely start here and learn all about Crime Capsule, but also note that we'll be discussing 2 recent stories covered on that show.
If you want to check those out first, then come back and hear our discussion. That's great. You can find a link in our show notes.
We'll wait right here, patiently. Just waiting. Okay, all good? Let's jump in.
As a reminder, Crime Capsule is hosted by Benjamin Morris.
The show features interviews with crime authors, specifically authors from Arcadia Publishing.
Today we're discussing 2 pairs of episodes.
First up, we're going to talk about Murder in Stark County, Ohio, which is an interview with author Kim Kenny. These episodes came out in July, specifically July 18th and 25th of 2024.
Then Richmond Murder and Mayhem, an interview with author Selden Richardson. These came out on August 1st and 9th of 2024.
Each of these episodes is about 30 minutes long. And Dee, let's discuss.
Okay, so this is a really different episode type or bonus episode that we haven't done before, where we're discussing 2 pairs of a podcast, but we've already delved into what we liked about the podcast in our preview and recap of the McGlinchey murders. So I feel like, Jeff, we should mix it up a little bit.
Okay.
Let's just say we know how we feel about Ben Morris, and let's talk about whether we feel like the host, stood to our initial thoughts in those first pairings. And then maybe we can dive into each of the murders discussed here separately.
Yeah, I mean, these are some crazy murders, so I'm excited to get to them. But I think that sounds like a good plan. Let's do it.
So the host, Ben Morris, what we liked about him the last time is he seemed to really have a good relationship with the author he was talking to. He had clearly done a lot of research. He treats the interview like really professionally, but he comes across really calm, really warm, and kind of, I don't know, I feel like you could sit down and have a chat with him, which we do next week. But
that's true. I think he brings a lot of kind of empathy to these stories, and there's a sense of humor that comes with them. There's, the hosts that we've heard have really been all over the map, and I think his style is very kind of warm and friendly, and it's pleasant to listen to. Like, I enjoy listening to him interview someone. And I think we've also talked before about how the interview format, right, like the 2-voice format, works really well. And I think we liked it in the McGlinchey murders. I think I liked it again. I actually kind of liked it to different degrees. Now we've listened to 3 different stories, right? McGlinchey murders was the one we did before. And then the Ohio one and the Virginia one here. I think the Kim Kenny one, which was the Ohio one, which we'll get to in a minute, I think that one I liked a lot. I thought that one went really well. I kind of like the Selden Richardson one a little bit less, but we can get to that when we talk about more in depth on that episode.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you can hear his empathy, and like he has a bit of fun with it. I also think it's just interesting because he's dealing with historical crimes, like murders that happened so long ago, that I feel like the ability to be lighter with the story in a way is there, but he doesn't do it in a disrespectful way. He does maintain respect, I think, for all involved in the cases, and I think that stood the test of time.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the other thing that stands out, that's I think unique about this show, is it's just as much about like history and America and these kind of interesting places as it is about these crimes, and I think I feel like we've tried to do that on this show where we do like the time machine, right? Like we talk about specific things that were happening either in these times or in these places. And I mean, he doesn't have like the cool sound effects and all that that we do.
He has a cat in the
He
background.
does have a cat. In the Ohio one, the cat made an appearance, and that was pretty great. But he still has similar like these curiosities of these moments in time, which I think make this more interesting, more engaging. I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Should we get to the Ohio story?
Let's go to Ohio. Oh, Ohio.
Okay, Dave.
There's a lot of different places I'm learning about.
First of all,
within this podcast alone.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. You've never been to Ohio, right?
No.
Okay. Do you know where Ohio is?
No.
Okay.
In America?
Yes, in America.
It was interesting to hear that Ohio is claimed as having the most presidents.
The most presidents. When I told our producer Paxton that we were doing a story based in Ohio, the first thing he said was, "Oh, that's the birthplace of," and he rattled off a couple of presidents. So,
I am now looking at a map of America.
How's that going
It's
for you?
very far from us. Oh, it's close to Chicago.
It is close to Chicago.
There's too many states to know, to be honest.
I mean, there's like about 50 of them.
So I've heard. Like nobody's really sure because it's pretty hard to get that count. But I hear there's a song. I've been told there's a song.
About the 50 states?
Nathan told me that there was a song.
Oh, yeah. That checks out. There is there are many songs about Ohio, which if you want, I could sing a couple for you.
Get the guitar out.
I'm not going to. That's in a different room. All right, let's run down just a quick summary of what this story is about.
Okay. Sorry, you just finished real abruptly there. I didn't realize it was my turn to pick up. We usually only do that when it's like,
let's pretend this is
the
scripted.
intro and stuff. So what is this story about? Basically, the president at the time, George, what's his name? The president's?
William McKinley.
William McKinley.
Yes.
His brother-in-law, so his wife's brother, basically gets murdered by... He seems to be a real man about the town, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Like he's just going around sowing his seeds, getting up to no good.
That's the way of putting it. There's a lot of Georges involved. There is what is described as not a love triangle, but a love square or rectangle, some form of polygon that has more sides than a triangle.
Polygon, okay.
Like the geometry. Yeah, so his name is George Saxton. He is shot presumably by a woman named Annie George. So we got to keep track of the different Georges in front of the house that used to belong to a guy named George Althouse, where George's widow Eva lives, who Eva was one of George Saxton's many lovers, as is described in the podcast. So, at Eva's house, but this other woman, Annie George, shoots him there on a dark and stormy night.
He basically said, if you leave your husband and get divorced, I'll marry you. And then she divorced her husband. And guess what? He wasn't interested in marrying her.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, Dee, what, how did you feel about this story and about this episode?
I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed just Kim Kenny from the start. So the author who is being interviewed here, she just seemed really sound. Like they spoke a little bit about her job and how she ended up there and, her getting through the pandemic.
Yeah.
Managing to pay all of their workers there. Like,
we should talk about her job, where she works. So she works at the... Sorry, go ahead.
No, tell me.
The
McKinley Library?
At the President McKinley, the presidential library. So McKinley was president. Should we do a little American history for you here? We talked about President McKinley before. I don't know if you remember, but
when did we talk about him before?
We recently, because this crime happened in 1898, and I think we actually talked about this in the McGlinchey murders once because it was around the same time. So McKinley was president in 1898. McKinley gets assassinated. And that's why Theodore Roosevelt becomes president.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so McKinley is from Canton, Ohio, which fun fact about Canton. I've been to Canton. It's the birthplace of American football, and it is where the Football Hall of Fame is. And every year they play the Hall of Fame game. Anyway, if you're into American football, Canton is a very historic place to visit. I have more. I can geek out further on the Presidential Library bit if you'd like.
She was real sound, and she paid all her workers and even kept up all their health benefits, even though it was really stressful and really hard during the pandemic. And I thought that really lent itself to just, it's a positive start, isn't it? When you hear someone being just sound.
Did you know how much time I spent looking up the history of presidential libraries in the United States?
You know how I spoke to you about how Ben Morris does a really good job of making history not boring?
Can I share one fact about presidential libraries?
Come on.
Okay. So McKinley was president in the 1890s, and this, oh my gosh, this is interesting. Give it a second.
Go on.
So that library is not an official presidential library. It is sort of an off-the-grid presidential library. There was not an official presidential library until Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was president in the 30s and 40s. And it was Roosevelt, so not Theodore, but Franklin, the FDR, the one in World War II, who was like, hey, all of my papers and all of my stuff from being president is important and should be preserved and should be on display. And so he decided that let's make this an official thing. And so every president after him has had an official presidential library, and all of their stuff, all of their, everything they worked on, all their paperwork and just general like bric-a-brac goes into a library, including, so I went down this rabbit hole, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, which is in California, you can go visit it. It's the most popular one, has an actual Air Force One, the plane that the president flies around on, an old one that you can go check out. There's a bunch of random stuff from different presidents that are in these libraries. But again, the McKinley one is an unofficial one. Most of the presidents have unofficial ones. I can tell you're getting increasingly bored the more I go. I swear this is interesting to some people. Maybe not you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not that it's not interesting to me. It's just there's a time and a place. And
this is not that time nor that place.
I'm not in that time. Yeah, this is not the place.
All right, we can move on. So anyway, George Saxton, Annie George, love Polygon.
I love Polygon indeed, and yeah, I just thought it was interesting. I thought Kim had a lot of interesting points. I felt like she was really good at like scene setting, even when she was talking about the murder having actually happened, and it was so dark that someone had to light a match to actually see who had been shot. I don't know. I just found all that really interesting, and I thought she came across really well. And then also brought some sort of like jovial nature to it all. It seems that within her book, she tried to pull out some of the kind of funny scenarios that happened. For instance, when Annie was arrested, which was only like a couple of hours after he was murdered, or he was shot, the police came up to arrest her, and she just went, well, and that's it.
I love that. That was so great.
So funny.
I was thinking about like great arrest lines, like when someone gets arrested and just saying, well, like that
was it.
Fantastic.
She didn't ask what she was being arrested for. She didn't like claim anything. She just said, well.
But we need to talk about the fact that she then goes on and has great lawyers.
I know.
And all they have is circumstantial evidence. And on top of that, it seems like everybody in Canton was kind of like, there's a quote actually from the defense attorney. I think it's the closing argument line. All things considered, Canton's just better off without him. So.
And like people agreed. People loved her.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, great. This guy was awful. Nobody seemed to like him.
And I found that what I found interesting about that, in a way, it was actually great. Not his murder, but was that he was the president's brother-in-law, and the president and his wife had said, we don't want to expedite it, like treat him like a normal, like he is a normal person, but treat him like you would anyone. Don't take our relationship with him into account when you're doing your investigation or with the court case or whatever. I loved that. But also, nobody was trying to be extra PC because he had a relationship or like a connection to the president, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That wouldn't happen nowadays.
Well, another thing that I don't think would happen nowadays is so Annie George gets off, right? Like she doesn't get convicted of this murder, and then she disappears. Like there's just like
fascinating.
No record of her. She's just
I find that so interesting.
Off the grid.
Yeah, so she's got like all of these different people who are interested in talking to her in Ohio, in Canton. So then she goes on like a tour, like a lecture circuit, I think they called it.
Which was a thing of the time, I think. Like it's a thing that people did then.
So, but she goes and the crowds just aren't there. So there's not an interest in her anymore, at least. And then she just kind of disappears. Nobody really there's no knowledge of where she's gone. It kind of adds to the whole mystery of it.
Yeah. Kills a guy.
I feel like as I was listening to this episode, I could see it play out. Like I could see it, as a show or as a movie or something just playing out. And yeah.
This would be a good movie.
Really amazing.
This would be a solid movie.
It would, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Do you want to work on that script? Do a treatment?
Ooh.
See if we can.
I think so. I'm going to message Kim Kenny.
Yeah.
Say, let's get this done.
She seems solid. I would have a beer with her for sure if I'm ever in Ohio again.
I don't know. I think you'd have a sit down with her and discuss the historical facts that you both know.
I
don't know if you
have more presidential library facts if you want them.
No, it's her, not me.
Okay. I'll go on my own to Ohio. I lived in Ohio briefly. It's lovely there. Not Canton, but I've been to Canton. It's nice.
It sounds lovely. I have no problem with Ohio. I've zero problems. I just haven't been there yet. There's a lot of places to visit.
A lot of great there's a lot of great cities that start with the letter C. There's Canton, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, all in Ohio. There's other towns too, but those are the ones that I've been to.
Do you just go to the ones starting with C?
Yeah, in Ohio, right? Like in different states, it's different letters, but
okay.
Yeah, Ohio is for Anyway, before we before we wrap this up, one thing I wanted to note: the book that is being referenced here by Kim Kenny isn't just about the George Saxton murder. It's about a series of different murders, and we don't hear about really any of them except one little bit about Amelia Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't get the whole story, just that this was a case that involved blood that they couldn't figure out if it was human or not. Which is such a bizarre fact to just drop and then walk away from.
I know.
Yeah.
Isn't it kind of tying in with the mystery of Annie?
Yeah.
Just drop it there. Make the people buy the book. Don't give it all away for free.
So this happened in 1898.
I was about to quote a phrase my mum uses, but it's not for here.
What's the quote?
No, I'm not going to say it. It would have to be cut.
Annie George disappears. So the crime happens in 1898. The McGlinchey murders, James Dunham, that was 1896. Do you think Annie George and Dunham are off in some small...
No, Dunham, Annie was into charismatic men. She wasn't into Dunhams.
Dunham was in a bicycle club. That's all I got on Dunham.
Oh, it's up there. It's up there with the most charismatic trait in a man. But I mean, a bicycle club. Yeah, no, I don't think so. But imagine that's what happened.
They're just in Cabo.
Wasn't one of his... Oh no, it was Iowa, wasn't it? I keep getting these two places mixed up.
Iowa and Ohio, both places I've lived.
A lot.
Different states.
States.
They both are 4 letters, starting in with vowels. Middle of America.
Okay.
All right. Should we talk about the Richmond murder and mayhem? Selden Richardson is the author. So let's do a quick summary of this story. This is a very different story. We're in the 1920s.
We should have actually prefaced these by saying that what is interesting is they take Crime Castle takes a theme and uses that theme to like thread a few different stories together. So the theme of both Ohio and Richmond is passion, crimes of passion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a summer series for the hot summer months, Crimes of Passion. I can do a quick summary of this story. So this is a story about a guy named John Wesley Faze, and this is from the 1920s. This is a guy, father of 5, married to a woman named Martha. He was a deacon in his Baptist church. Like, he had a regular job. Seems like
part of some country club or something, wasn't he?
Yeah, he worked at like a country club, and he meets this woman named Elsie Snipes, who
he bumps into her. Apparently, like, they literally bump into her, and she's just like, she kisses him.
Yeah,
maybe?
that's right. She kisses him, and he's just like, she's described as the epitome of womanhood. Which, what does that mean?
I don't know, because who's describing
whom in this?
Yeah. Like, is it the author describing her? Because I have some questions for him.
Anyway, Elsie and John, yeah, things go seemingly openly. She becomes his mistress. I don't know. So anyway, just to wrap up what the crime is. So John and Elsie are having an affair. John gets increasingly, I think, sort of, I don't know what you would say. Obsessed. Also, like, jealous that Elsie maybe isn't being faithful to him, which, the nerve of the guy who is cheating on his wife with this other woman and then is mad that his other woman is maybe cheating on him. I know this happens all the time, but still, come on.
I know. It's real bad.
Anyway.
He doesn't seem like a great guy, to be fair. He tells his wife constantly how amazing Elsie is. And you're just like, oh, right.
Yeah, let's pause there for a second because, yeah, there's a real strong point made about that. And that, I mean, to go home to your wife every night and say, yeah, this mistress I have, she's the best. Like, to your wife and your mother of your 5 children. Anyway, so it ends up, so he murders her, of course. Elsie. John murders Elsie. But he claims that she shoots herself. Real bizarre alibi. He says he was in the other room drinking and playing a tune on the piano.
With one hand?
One hand, yeah. Just setting the scene. And he really lives up to that sort of privilege of the country club white dude, I guess. He gets 8 months in jail.
8 months. He is convicted of killing her. Nobody has any doubt that he killed her, but he's sentenced to 8 months in jail.
He ends up getting convicted of manslaughter, not murder. Sort of baffling. And so that's the crime. That's what we're talking about. Dee, what do you think about this one?
So I have thoughts. I feel like I would like to talk to Selden, the author, because I don't know whether I picked him up wrong with the way he was speaking at some points about Elsie. I'm unsure whether I picked him up wrong or I picked him up right, and I just am not okay with some of the things that were said.
Like what?
It felt like there was like this misogynistic undertone to it of he describes Elsie as being loose and maybe lacking in morals, which presumably is because apparently that they think that she had a family herself and she had left her husband and her kids, and obviously she kissed this guy Faison, yeah. The first time he met her, and there's comments of he made about the Faison made that he got frisky with her. Was that the phrase I think that was used? But it's turned around that that's like a massive negative on Elsie, not necessarily Faison, who's got a family at home as well. Both of them seem to, but I don't know whether Selden was actually talking about this from at this time that would have been the thought, like a man won't be judged you know, to the same regard, which to be fair isn't actually too far away from where we are now. But, you know, a man who's having an affair, as my mum would say, stepping out, wouldn't have been judged in the same light as a woman would. So I don't know whether his commentary on this is, you know, in line with the time that he's discussing, or it's, you know, his viewpoint. And so I took a little bit of that irked me. And I was trying to be aware that maybe I'm just hearing this in a way that's, maybe I'm misunderstanding what is happening here and like what the comments actually mean. Yeah. Did you pick up on any of that?
I did, I think. And I actually, the thing that I focused was less on the description of Elsie, although, yeah, she was described. I looked up this story just to get a sense of who, like, there's pictures of these folks. So they talk about this picture of her. Did you look that up? Did you see what she looks like?
I mean, I could tell from their description was pretty good. That kind of flapper.
Yeah, if you've seen, like, The Great Gatsby or that season of Downton Abbey where they're in the 20s, like that's what it looks like. That's what she looks like. Anyway, I think I focused more on John's wife Martha and just the way she was portrayed as sort of the long-suffering wife. And I like, this is a woman. So she's described as Catholic, although he's a deacon in a Baptist church. So I didn't quite understand how that worked out. But she's the mother of 5 kids, right? If I heard that right, that she's Catholic, like, this woman does not have a lot of options, right? Like, she can't get divorced. Nope. She can't own property. She can't have a checking account, right? Like, she's pretty much stuck with this guy who's coming home and bragging about this epitome of womanhood that he bumped into. So I don't know that there was enough empathy for her, right? Like, I think this is a place where I felt that the author, Seldon Richardson, was maybe a little bit too flippant. I think the host, Ben Morris, did a great job of being sort of respectful and trying to call out some of these things.
I think that's a good point that I didn't make, is I could tell he was trying to say, oh, well, we don't know, you know, kind of trying to give back. I think at one point when he was talking about Elsie, Seldon Richardson was talking about Elsie, he said, you know, well, we really don't know, you know, what reason she had for leaving her husband and kids. Like, we don't know that.
Right.
And like, let's not fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Which is a hard thing with these stories. I mean, this is from 100 years ago, and these other stories are from 100 and more years ago, right? 130 or whatever years ago. And
100 and more.
100 and more. There's just things we don't know, and we're never going to know, right? Like, it's just lost to history. And as much research as you do, like, you certainly aren't going to know people's intentions if they didn't leave a record of it and it's not accessible. So you don't want to put thoughts in their heads, right?
Yeah.
Like, all we have to go on is what's in the record, like, right? Like, what was in the newspaper, what was in the court records, like that kind of stuff. But it's limited. And yeah, this is a case where I feel like there's bits of this story that we're never going to know. And it left me wanting a little bit. And maybe some of this more is in the book too. This is another thing that I wanted to ask you too. Like, so we're listening to an interview with the author of a book, and obviously there's more context in the book that we're not getting, because in a 2 half-hour, so an hour-long interview, we're not going to get all the details. Mm-hmm. There's going to be more. And I mean, we talked about the Kim Kenny one, how that one, you know, the story about George Saxton was just one story of several in these books. But I do kind of want to go, like, I'm interested in reading some of these books. I'm interested in going deeper on some of these stories, just to get some more of the details that maybe they couldn't cover in Crime Capsule.
That's good. That's probably like one of the things that it's trying to do as a podcast. It's not my style of book to be interested in reading, and I enjoy getting the
true crime book is not your style of book?
A true, like, heavy on the history true crime book is not my book.
Is this where you start? Like,
I like history, like, a lot, but you
do? You're not going to
history
snore through a history book?
No. If it's written well. It's like, I didn't snore through any of the podcasts that Ben Morris was hosting.
Because he didn't go on about
That's what I'm
presidential
saying.
libraries.
No, I just, yeah, I just think the way you deliver it is so important. And, you know, I think you today, you know, put a lot of effort into finding facts about libraries and stuff. But I don't know how much effort you thought about putting into maybe engaging the listener on those facts.
It's a life-size Air Force One in the Ronald Reagan Library.
Yeah, but you didn't use a voice like that. You just went, it was just, it wasn't engaging. I'm sorry.
So
it
what you're
wasn't.
saying is I'm not Ben Morris.
No, I don't think you are. Are you?
No.
Am I incorrect?
Are you going to trade
I'm
podcast
really
hosts?
sarky today. Am I going to trade podcast hosts? No, I don't. I don't know if anyone else would have me, to be fair, Jeff. Okay. The other thing I really appreciated about this podcast was, you know, they left the gruesomeness out. I really appreciate that. Like, Ben made the note that in the book, the way Richardson has described the wound from the gunshot is apparently really gruesome. You know, Elsie didn't even die straight away. And so we hear that, and he says it's described explicitly in the book, but, you know, we're trying to somewhat be a family podcast, and so we're not going into the details of that. And I appreciated that, because I think there's a level of respect there of not diving into the gruesomeness. I haven't read the book. I don't know how it's described in there. I think when you're reading like a historical book, especially when she remained alive after, and what he did after, you know, picking her up and running out of the house and being like, she shot herself with all this drama or whatever. I think maybe the gruesomeness possibly is warranted, but I did really appreciate that they left it out of the podcast. I don't think it was necessary.
I agree. I think that we've talked about this. I mean, the This American Life, where we got into the gruesomeness of what happens when people get shot in the head. Like it is gory and unpleasant.
I did like it on that one, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a time and a place for that. And I think, I mean, to your point about the sort of potential misogyny inherent in some of this presentation, I think that was a place to be respectful. And I'm glad that Ben Morris called that out. I thought that was good of him to do.
I agree. On that note, I thought it was fairly fascinating the way the forensics were used in the case. Apparently they like dragged furniture into the courtroom, like dragged furniture from her house into the courtroom to replicate the shooting, and, you know, the blood splatter or whatever, that like it has to have been from someone standing up as opposed to, you know, her doing it herself. I found that fascinating. I wouldn't have thought, if I'm watching this on a movie or in a TV show and they brought that in, I'd be saying, that wouldn't happen at that time. You know, that couldn't be factually correct. Whereas, like, I don't know, were you surprised by that?
I was surprised by that. I think, but I'm always surprised by that sort of stuff, right? Like, I think they brought up the fact that she couldn't have shot herself because of the angle of the gun, and like the angle at which she shot herself in the head is an angle at which no one would do to themselves, just because the logistics of it are so complicated. And this is something that I feel like in other stories I've certainly read about. That's been a topic of, like, you know, it's a conspiracy. Like the one that it made me think of, just because of the way they described it, was Kurt Cobain, and so Kurt Cobain killed himself with a shotgun, and the conspiracy theory is that someone killed him because it is difficult to, like, it's logistically difficult to kill yourself, to die by suicide with a shotgun. And as a teen in the 90s, I was very interested in Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, and so I read a lot of stories about that. And I don't know, it's interesting to think about of just sometimes, a lot of stories will just leave that part out, and probably with good reason, right? Because it's a gory, gruesome aspect of it.
I mean, when they discuss it in this, though, I don't necessarily think that they discuss it in any sort of gruesome way, which is, you know, they leave out the gruesomeness of the wound as discussed in the book, and they bring in the fact that forensics were used, and it's really as much as they used furniture, they tried to replicate in the courtroom how it happened.
Yeah.
To emphasize his guilt. I just found it really interesting. I love the idea of them like dragging the furniture into the courtroom.
It seems really
There's something
unusual.
just
Like,
so funny
how
about
often
it.
do you think
Yeah.
that happens? Like, I've never heard of that before.
No. Mad. And like, especially if you kind of compare the Richmond murders and the court cases with Ohio, and Ohio, you'd expect they're all anything used at all to to convict any, like, because again of the link to the president, and yet she got off, not for want of trying, maybe. I don't know if we know how much the trying was. As you said, Canton might have been a better place without him, but here it feels like they really tried, and to really try and then get him convicted must have felt like a win, until you heard the 8 is not followed even by years.
The craziest thing too, and I liked the call out by Ben Morris in this one, that on Crime Capsule, he says they don't believe in closure in these cases. They focus more on the aftermath. And this story has a bizarre aftermath, just like the Ohio one. So he serves his 8 months, right? This incredibly lenient sentence. And then he lives a normal life. He goes back to his wife, and they live to ripe old age. They have a bunch of grandchildren. I think they live in like the 70s or 80s, like into the 1970s.
She lived pretty old.
He lived until 1972. I actually have it up here. Yeah, and I think she lived into the 1980s. So yeah, that's just, I mean, it's crazy to think that he was involved in this this crazy murder, right? And this affair, and then just serves his very brief sentence, then just goes back, gets a new job, lives out his days as a regular citizen. No more crime.
No more crime. No more doing time.
There it is, right there. Yep.
Yeah, it was fascinating. I definitely found like the sentencing was interesting. And one thing I just want to call out here, which I really enjoyed, and it goes back to the tidbits of history that is brought in without it being too history heavy, I feel like in the Crime Capsule episodes we've listened to. But, the sentencing of 8 months, you alluded to it earlier. Maybe it was due to the fact that he was a white man, respected in his community. Either Ben Morris or Richardson, I can't remember which one, brings up the fact that at the time a black woman was serving 80 years for forgery. 30 years for forgery.
Yeah.
And they do discuss very briefly the bizarreness of how lenient of a sentence he got as a white man in comparison to what would have happened to a black person who had committed even a minor crime at the time.
Right. And just as a reminder, this is the 1920s in Virginia. So this is the Jim Crow South. And that was a very illustrative example of just the incredible contrast in punishments. And there were other circumstances of why he got such a lenient sentence, but I think there's no question that if he wasn't this kind of white man from some type of place of privilege, he wouldn't have gotten that super easy sentence.
Definitely. Anyway, come here. Before we close this out, I'd love to know, we've now looked or listened to 3 pairs of episodes from Crime Capsule. We loved the first pairing, and we've listened to 2 more. Do you still feel like this is a solid show? Is this a show that you might come back to and listen to more?
Oh, definitely. I think I absolutely would. I think when we looked at what the couple most recent episodes as of when we're recording this were, it was these 2 stories, the Ohio one and the Virginia one. And, I looked them both up. Yeah, great. I'm in. I'm interested in these. And now having listened to them, I still think that, I like the Richmond one less. And I think that was a factor of I just maybe was less engaged with the author than I was with the other 2 authors. But honestly, 2 out of 3 I thought were great. And it's not that the third one wasn't great. It just wasn't as good. And there were some things that I maybe took issue with. So yeah, I would definitely listen to others as they come up and look interesting. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think this kind of goes back to one of the things we were talking about earlier is like the 30 minutes, the interview broken into two. I could see myself putting this on my list of things I listen to every week because it is 30 minutes. And I feel like I will get something new out of every one of them. You know, obviously a new true crime story, but also I just feel like there's more to it. There's another layer to these that's really interesting.
Well, you're going to learn what all the 50 states are. I mean, over time.
Like, I mean, I will hear them mentioned. I don't know if I'll learn them. I don't know if it'll embed in my head.
I think you should print out a map of the United States and just put like chalk outlines.
Okay, next time on
of every
chalk outlines of the murders. Oh my goodness.
I mean, I do have a map of the United States with chalk coloring in the states where I've run races, but it's not. I have not committed murders in any of those states.
Well, who knows?
I know, pretty sure.
Okay.
As far as you know, that's the case.
I mean, you did say you haven't even cheated even a little bit on any of the marathons, so I think the chances of you murdering someone in every place that you've run a race is fairly slim.
Before we wrap up today, we just want to remind everyone, if you enjoyed this, go to Patreon. Help support the show. Go to patreon.com/so-much-crime, so little time, or just go to patreon.com and search for the name of the show. We will give you bonus content. We will give you early access to clips from the show. We'll tell you what kinds of things we're going to cover so you can go listen to in advance. Also, we'll send you some swag.
Next time, we're revisiting our recent crime battle champion, Crime Capsule.
We loved Crime Capsule's take on the McGlinchey murders of 1896, and we thought that host Ben Morris did an amazing job covering the case.
So guess what, Jeff? We're going to get him on the show.
That's right. We're going to have an interview with Crime Capsule host Ben Morris.
That's on the next So Much Crime.
So Little Time.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of MimeGov Media. The executive producer is Paxton Calariso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show in your podcast app. Don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.